Hey, what's up guys? Brian Kelly here from Zombie Guitar. In this lesson we're going to talk about augmented chords and diminished chords. So the hardest part about augmented and diminished chords is just simply playing the shapes, because they're kind of funky shapes that you may not be used to. But actually understanding how to use them and put them into an in-key chord progression is really not that hard. So don't let this stuff intimidate you. As you go through this lesson, you're going to see that they're really not that hard to use. So before getting started, I just wanted to say definitely take a look at zombieguitar.com if you haven't already. If you're into learning all about the fretboard, learning all about theory for guitar, and scales, arpeggios, modes, all that kind of stuff, Zombie Guitar is the site for that. It's a one-of-a-kind site. Check it out. In this lesson, we're going to be in the key signature of C major / A minor. So you can use your circle of fifths to help you determine the 3 major and 3 minor chords that are found in this key. And we're just going to play a chord progression that sounds like this. It's going to be the A minor chord to an F major chord to a C major chord to an E minor chord. So that's the progression. So it's a 6-4-1-3 chord progression in this key signature. And everything that we do as far as augmented chords and diminished chords goes, is going to be done to the 3 chord, the last chord of the progression. The 3 chord in this key signature is the E minor chord. So everything that we do is going to be done to that chord. If we were in a different key signature, say we were in the key signature of G major / E minor, your 3 chord would be here. If you were in the key signature of D major / B minor, your 3 chord would be here. So always using your circle of fifths, the 3 chord can always be found inner circle clockwise position, and that's what we're going to do all of the stuff to as far as replacing with augmented and diminished chords. So let me just first change that minor chord to a major chord. That's the first change we're going to do. So it's going to sound like this. That's the first thing, changing that from a minor to a major chord. It sounds good, it works. Technically that's an out of key chord at this point, but it still works. It's very common to take that chord, the 3 chord in that position of the circle of fifths, and make that into a major chord. So that's the first thing. So the second thing is you can then make that into a dominant 7th chord by going like this. So I just made that into a dominant 7th chord, and again, it still sounded cool. It worked. It's still an out of key chord. If you wanted to remain in key, you would have to keep that a minor chord, but we're making it into a major chord or a dominant 7th chord. And the thing to notice is that it has tension. So it wants to lead back to something, and that something that it wants to lead back to is the start of the progression again, which starts on an A minor. So you can hear tension, resolution, tension, resolution. So that's the idea here, tension and resolution. So now I'm going to replace that E7 chord or E major chord or whatever. I'm going to replace that with a diminished chord now. So I'm going to use a B diminished chord, and I'm going to explain why in a minute. But so it's going to go like this: A minor to an F major to a C major to a B diminished back to an A minor. So I used a B diminished chord there, and I'll explain why I chose B in a minute as we get to the theory part of this lesson. The thing to understand is that it still had that same tension effect. So this is tension, resolution, tension, resolution, resolution. So you can see it kind of functions the same way. So now I'm going to use an augmented chord in the place of that E chord. And the augmented chord I'm going to use is going to be a C augmented. Again, I'm going to explain why I'm choosing C augmented as the augmented chord to use in place of this E. But that's going to sound like this. So again, it had a sort of tense type of feel. In my opinion, it's not quite as tensiony as the diminished chord, but it still had a tense type of feel. So that's the whole trick here. So you figure out what your 3 chord is in whatever the key signature that you're working in, which can always be found in the circle of fifths, inner circle, clockwise position. And then once you know what your 3 chord is, you can either replace the 3 chord with a major chord, a dominant 7th chord, a diminished chord, or an augmented chord. And all of them are pretty much going to have the same function. They're going to cause that tension that wants to lead back to the start of the progression, starting over again. So I actually just uploaded a new song to this channel this week, which uses this concept over and over and over, the entire song for all 5 minutes of it. It's called Machine Elves. If you want to check it out, I'll post a link to that below. But it's the same chord progression going on over and over and over, and I'll show you how I use this augmented and diminished stuff in this chord progression. It's actually in the same key, A minor, C major, so it sounds like this. So that's the chord progression. So the thing that all of these chords that we're replacing this minor 3 chord with have in common is one single note that is out of the key. And it's that one single note that causes this tension sound, and it's that one single note that wants you to go back to the start of the progression. So we're doing everything to the E minor chord here. The E minor is the 3 chord in this key signature. The E minor contains the notes E, G, and B. So by making that into a major chord, you now have E, G sharp, and B. The only difference between a minor chord and a major chord is one single note, which is the third of the chord. So taking the E minor chord, which is E, G, and B, and making it into an E major chord, which is E, G sharp, and B, that G sharp is the key note to all of this. So what's up with that G sharp note? So there's this thing called the harmonic minor scale. I have a few lessons about the harmonic minor scale. I'll post links to below if you want to dive more into that subject. The harmonic minor scale is simply just the natural minor scale with a 1 note difference, and it takes the 7th note of that scale and it raises it by 1/2 step. So if this is your A minor scale, or A natural minor scale, you raise the 7th note by 1/2 step, and that gives you your harmonic minor scale. So this is your A harmonic minor scale. Playing it through 2 octaves. So that's your A harmonic minor scale. It already has that type of exotic sound to it. Really cool sound. I love that sound. But that one note that's 1/2 step away from the root, that's the note that is common among all of these chords. Augmented chords, diminished chords, major 3 chord, dominant 7 chord in the place of the 3 chord. That one note is consistent among all of those. Every other note that's found in all of those chords is all part of the key signature. It's just that one single note that causes all the magic to happen. So even if you're looking at this from the major perspective, so if you don't want to consider this to be the key of A minor, you want to call this the key signature of C major instead, it doesn't really matter. You can still do that. The A minor scale, the C major scale, it's the exact same scale, exact same notes. You're just replacing that one note, that G with a G sharp. Major perspective, minor perspective, it does not matter. The same chords are available to you. The same stuff is done to the same chord. Or it's all being done to that minor 3 chord. So diminished chords. So there's only 3 diminished chords. Very, very simple. The shape that we're going to be playing is this. There's other shapes of diminished chords, But we're just going to stick with this shape for this lesson, and there's only 3 of them. So if you look at the notes here, you have the note B, you have the note F, you have the note G sharp, and you have the note D. When I say there's only 3 diminished chords, I mean that you can take the same shape and you can move it up by 3 frets, 1, 2, 3, and the exact same chord is here. The notes are in a different order now. So you have your D here, then you have G sharp, and then you have B, and then you have F, but it's still the same exact 4 notes as down here. Then if you slide it up another 3 frets, 1, 2, 3, it's the same chord again, same notes, just in a different order. And then if you slide it up 3 frets, again, it's the same 4 notes, just in a different order. So all of those lead you back to the A minor. So they all have that same tensiony effect. They have the exact same 4 notes, 3 of which are part of this key, 1 of which is out of the key, which is that note G sharp that I told you about, which is the note that creates this tension. But that's why there's only 3 diminished chords, because you can choose to play your diminished chord here, you can play it here, you can play it here, but then when you get to here, it becomes the same thing again. So everything repeats itself. So there's only 3 diminished chords to choose. So if I would have chose the other 2 possible diminished chords to use, so instead of choosing a B diminished chord, let's say I would have chose to play a C diminished chord, that would have been wrong because everything would have been out of key. When you choose the correct one of the 3 diminished chords, all of the notes are in key except for that 1 harmonic minor note, that 1 G sharp note. So that's why I went with the B diminished chord. Could have went with the D diminished chord, F diminished chord, or G sharp diminished chord, and it would have been the exact same thing for all of those. So that's diminished. So now we'll look at augmented chords. So these function the same way as diminished chords in that you can choose to play it here, you can choose to play it here, you can choose to play it here, and it's all the same thing. Again, this is known as a symmetrical chord. So with augmented chords, there's 4 possible options. You have 1, and then it starts over again. So this is the same as this. The notes are C, E, and G sharp. C and E are part of this key. G sharp is not part of this key, but it's that harmonic minor note. If you move it up to here, again, you have E, you have G sharp, and you have C. Same notes, just different order. And if you move it up to here, you have G sharp, C, and E. And if you want to add in a note up here on the B string, so those are augmented chords. So if you choose the right one, then it's going to function properly. It's going to function the same way as, the diminished chord. It's going to function the same way as making the minor 3 chord into a major 3 chord. That's because everything else is in key except for the 1 note, which is the G sharp, the harmonic minor note. It shares that same thing. If you choose the wrong one, like if you don't choose the right one, if you try to choose this one, then you're going to have too many out of key notes. It's not going to work. So even though it's pretty easy to fit augmented chords and diminished chords in there, and there's only 3 possible diminished chords and only 4 possible augmented chords, you still have to make sure that you choose the right one. So that's what I have to say about augmented and diminished chords. There are definitely lots of other ways to use them. I have other lessons on diminished chords and augmented chords and using diminished arpeggios and stuff like that. All of those links can be found below if you want to dive more into this. This is just one simple approach that you can take to using these types of chords in a in-key chord progression to really give you a somewhat of an exotic sound. So if you have any questions, comments, feel free to ask. Thanks for watching.